Right, good morning and you're welcome to class. This is PED 150 and this has been an interesting course. We started primary science teaching methods in the previous class, and I think we'll just talk more on other aspects of that particular topic. This class is focused on Unit 4, Resources for Primary Science Teaching. Resources for Primary Science Teaching. Excuse me. Now, as a form of introduction, we would say that teaching science is not simply a matter of a teacher standing in front of maybe some pupils and talking. So, for science learning to be meaningful, pupils should be able to experience what you want to teach them. Like they should be able to see, touch, observe, compare, investigate, and even sometimes experiment what you're about to teach them or what you are teaching them. So let's say, for instance, imagine a primary four teacher teaching a topic on maybe parts of a flower, for instance. Let's take part of a flower, for example. Assuming you want to teach that to primary four, and you enter the classroom and you say a flower consists of the petals, the sepals, maybe the stamens, and the pistil. And probably you write the definition of those things on the board, and your pupils copy them in their lesson notes and their books. You are one teacher. Now, let's compare that teacher with another teacher. Excuse me. This other teacher enters the classroom, looks carefully at the pupils and show them a flower, and asks the pupils to look carefully what part of the flower is colorful, and then they should touch it. And also ask them to count the petals that are there, and even ask them if they can find the pollen. Now, the pupils are likely going to remember or retain the teaching of teacher A, also teacher B, more than teacher A. Why? It's because resources were used. So that is the importance of this unit. Science teaching, resources for primary science teaching. So when there are resources to use to aid your teaching, it stick longer in the pupils' memory, and it helps them to hold it for longer. So resources help to convert science from something pupils only hear about, into something they can experience. Experience is the main thing. You are trying to make your mode of teaching experiential by using the resources available. That is the idea of this unit. At the end of this unit, what are the things we should be able to do? At the end of this unit, we should be able to classify resources required for teaching primary science. You should know resources that you will need when you want to teach primary science. You should be able to discuss human resources required for teaching primary science, and even material resources, and also the need for innovation in teaching primary science. Now, let's go to the main content. Introduction to resources for primary science. Now, I may not be looking at it. Since I'm the only one here, I probably won't be reading this material. I will just go straight to my explanations and illustration to help you understand. What are the things we are expected to learn? Open your mind now and know what you want to learn in this unit. One, you want to know how to explain the meaning of resources in primary science teaching. You will be able to identify some categories of resources we have and explain human resources and give examples. You'll be able to explain material resources likewise and give examples. Then discuss the importance of instructional resources. You'll be able to explain improvisation of science teaching or in science teaching. And excuse me, you're able to explain innovation in primary science. And lastly, identify ICTs and the way ICT has also improved the teaching of science. Now, introduction to resources for primary science. Let's introduce you to resources that are available for primary science. if you look at it critically, we can just say a resource is anything, you know, a resource is anything that can assist the teacher and the learner in achieving the objective of a lesson. Each lesson you want to teach in the class has an objective. We've done that under long time goals and vision and also the short-term objectives. So the objective you want to achieve in each class will be better achieved, or we have a better result when there are resources with which you can, simplify that you're teaching. So the resources doesn't help only you, the teacher, to teach well. It also helps the learners to understand better. So resources we have in primary science include people. You can use people, objects. We have materials like equipment, books, pictures, models. You can use computers. You can use the environment too. You can use laboratories and, of course, community members. Now, those are resources, but the material helps us to categorize them into two different parts, two major categories. Category one, human resources, and category two, material resources. So if you check all the things I've mentioned, people, object, equipment, books, pictures, models, computers, the environment, laboratories, communities, or community members, you will find out that we have two sets of things there in that list. And one is the human aspect, and the other is material aspect. So that is why when we talk about resources of teaching primary science, we will be able to conclude by saying we have two, human resources and material resources. Now, for the human resource, let's quickly read what is here in the material before I start my explanation. They said human resources. Human resources refer to individuals that one way or the other aid learning. These individuals include the science teacher, the laboratory assistant, other science students, technicians, and other individuals from outside the school, such as invited guest speakers, carpenters, blacksmiths, etc. Now, qualitative primary science education can only be provided when there is the availability of human resources, even when material resources are available. So effectiveness of these human resources, especially teachers, is, however, hampered by a number of factors. So some of these include insufficient funds, use of unqualified teachers, lack of retraining programs, and absence of attractive welfare packages for primary science teachers. This is an amazing note. What can we say on that? Excuse me. So we have the human resource, which are people who contribute to teaching and learning of science. So under the human resource, we can say the human resource are the who helps us learn science. The who helps us learn science. That is the WHO that helps us to learn science. That means the human aspect. Don't forget that we said we have two divisions, two categories, the human resources and the material resources. Why the human resources are the people that contribute to teaching and learning of science. The material resources are the physical objects, equipment, or instructional materials that are used to facilitate the learning of the subject science. So a simple way of remembering the two is that when you talk about human resource, you are talking about the who, that is the who, the WHO. When you talk about the material resources, you are talking about the what, that is WHAT. So the who that helps us to learn science, that is the human resource. The what that helps us to learn science is the material resource. Now let's take an example. Let's assume that you want to teach your pupils about electricity, for instance, and if you are going to do that, you definitely need a teacher. That is the human resource. And then the electrician is also an human resource. You need to bring somebody who is in the field of electricity, or sorry, in the field of electrical science, or so engineering rather. And that person is an electrician. That is a human resource. You may even need a laboratory assistant. That is also not a human resource. But when it comes to you needing wires, battery, bulb, switch, etc., those are material resources. So if you combine both of them together, it helps the teaching and learning of science. Now, let's look at what was written here about human resource. While human resources are individuals whose knowledge, skills, and activities assist the teaching and learning process. The science teacher is perhaps the most important human resource because the teacher organizes what? The lesson. That's what the material has expressly given us, that the teacher is the organizer of the lesson. So is, undoubtedly the most important human resource that we can have in the teaching of science. But the teacher is not the only human resource that we have. From that part of the material, you see that we have other human resource or resources that we may have for teaching science may include science teachers, other pupils that are in science department, laboratory assistants like technicians. We have health workers, could be farmers, could help us. They could be human resources, teaching of science, yeah, the agricultural part. And then the mechanics, the electricians, carpenters, blacksmiths, the engineers, the doctors, nurses, even environmental officers, guest speakers, and even parents and members of the community serve as human resource for teaching of science. Now, let me give an example for you to understand what we're trying to say. Let's assume suppose primary five pupils are learning how to do crop rotation. Or no, let's not use crop rotation, or how crops are cultivated, like how we get them planted and everything like that. So instead of everything or you explaining everything inside the classroom, you could just invite a local farmer from the community. So what will happen? The farmer will come demonstrate how seeds are planted or selected. We start from how seeds are selected to get the good ones that will really germinate. Then how the land is prepared. We show them how the land is prepared, even how the seeds are planted. The farmer will show them. Then how crops are weeded when weeds start growing and in the mixture with the plants that you plant. And then even how to harvest the crops. In that case, the human resource or the farmer has become the human instructional resource that you use in teaching that class. So that is an example. Now, if you want to teach first aid, let me give another illustration where human resource come into the teaching of science apart from the science teacher. Now, if you want to teach the treatment of minor injuries and you are trying to teach them first aid, right? So instead of relying completely on what the textbook is providing for you, you could just invite the school nurse. You go to the school, uh, what do we call them now? Well, it's not all school that have that clinic, but most of them do. You call the nurse that is available there. So what would the nurse do? The nurse would teach them how to clean small wounds. Maybe how to apply antiseptic like Dettol or anything. How to use cotton wool. How to apply bandage after you've done cleaning. The nurse will become the human resource. And so on and so forth. That goes on and goes on. So you could even invite a mechanic, a carpenter, and so on. It teaches them the practical aspect of it. That is how science is best taught. Now, why are human resources important? Why are they important? You may want to be wondering, why don't I, the science teacher, just teach them what is in the textbook and then we'll get it done? Well, good science equipment alone cannot guarantee good science learning anyway. But imagine a school with microscopes, computers, projectors, laboratories, charts, science kits, but there is no science teacher or competent science teacher. If the school should have all the instruments, but there is no competent science teacher in that school, all those expensive resources that have been put in place by the school, they will remain locked up in the cupboard because there is nobody to use it, nobody that knows how to use it, not to talk of how to teach it to learners. So material resources plus competent human resources will be equals to effective science teaching. So that's what they're trying to say here towards the end of this place, that it will be inefficient if we have good resources but no competent human resource to use them. So let's take, for example, to help you understand that concept. If probably we have a school that has a very beautiful car, but someone who knows how to drive it is not available. But the car, they have a very good school bus, beautiful one, but no driver. The car cannot take anyone to anywhere. Why? There's nobody to drive it. So that is how instructional materials are useful, but only when you have competent people that will, you know, or that knows how to use them to teach. Now, what are the problems affecting human resource? Based on what we've just read here, there are some problems affecting the human resource. You have government or school management. They may not provide enough money for the recruitment of teachers, training of teachers, seminars, workshops, or instructional materials. So those are the things. Now, another challenge is use of unqualified teachers. Where some schools resort into using just anybody available, but not that they are actually qualified to teach science. So a teacher without proper science knowledge may give wrong explanations, may avoid experiment. Why? Because he doesn't know how to do the experiment. And that is not going to help the learners. Now, such a teacher teach science as memorization, just want the student to know in their head. They can't relate with what you are teaching them. Now, that kind of person, an unqualified teacher may even discourage pupils from asking questions because he doesn't want anything that will disgrace him or her. So that is that. For instance, if you have an unqualified teacher, now an unqualified teacher may tell the pupils that evaporation means water disappearing. Now, that will look like the meaning, but that's not the absolute meaning or the complete meaning of evaporation. So a properly trained science teacher would try to say that evaporation is the changes of water or water changes from liquid into water vapor. Now, that gives them clearer picture. They also mention lack of training programs. And then because of the teaching method that is evolving, like things are not constant, they are actually dynamic in this our age. So a teacher might have been trained 25 years ago when they've not even started using fifth generation computers. Now they're using fifth generation computers. So that teacher will need to keep attending retraining. That's what we say. Lack of retraining programs also is killing the teaching of science. A lot of poor welfare packages, as mentioned there, poor salaries, and then even the working conditions of some schools and labs are not really encouraging. So that is killing the teaching motivation of the science teacher. Now, for the material resources, what did they have for us here? They said all equipment, apparatus, good textbooks, and any other physical object used as an instructional aid in teaching and learning process are referred to as material resources. Now, these materials significantly aid learning. Like human resources, inadequate funding seriously affect the availability of these resources. Now, this is why a good teacher would sometimes have to improvise to ensure some learning at least takes place where these resources are either not available or available in insufficient quantities. Okay, so what do we have here? Now, for the material resources, they are physical objects, equipment or apparatus, instructional materials that we use to facilitate teaching and learning. We have examples like printed materials like your textbooks, workbooks, newspaper magazines, worksheets, science manuals, and the rest of them. Then we have the visual materials like photographs, diagrams, charts, maps, like posters and flashcards that we use in teaching. And we have some three-dimensional materials like the models, specimens, skeletons, globes, that's the the globe of the world, excuse me. We have rocks, we have plants, we have preserved animals, in the labs. Then even laboratory materials like beakers, test tubes, thermometers, like microscope, I think measuring cylinders, and even the weighing balance, and so on and so forth. And we have electronic resources like the computers, the projectors, televisions, tablets. We have smartphones and videos and the rest of them. So why are material resources important? Why don't we only use the knowledge of the teacher alone? Why do we need material resources? Now, material resources can, although they, they may look somehow passive also, but material resources make abstract concept more concrete. When you are teaching with the word of mouth, you may be talking in abstraction. So when you have evidence in material, it becomes clearer. Let's say, for instance, you are teaching them that the earth evolves around the sun, that the earth that we are in is a circle. It's very hard for them to believe. Now, a young pupil may not understand that, doesn't know what revolution means. So let's now say, for instance, you as a teacher, you use a ball to mean the sun, and the globe, that is the earth, that globe that normally turn around, a string like this. If you go to all the science offices, you'll see them. Now, if you now use that to teach, maybe you place the ball in the center of the moving globe, and then the globe is now moving around it. The people can now see what you are trying to say, instead of you just telling them that the earth is moving around the sun. Excuse me. So, let's say, for instance, you want to teach the human heart, and probably let's say teacher A says that the heart has four chambers. The thing won't make sense to them. Like the one they for what is chamber? Four chambers. The heart, four chambers. They get confused a bit. But what if the teacher says or shows a diagram or a model of the heart, and point out from that model or from the diagram the right atrium, the left atrium, maybe the right ventricle and the left ventricle? What happens? That one now, you've made them to understand what you are trying to say, not just telling them that the heart has four chambers. That's what we're trying to talk about when we talk about material resources. Now, the real environment, excuse me, as a material resource, how does the environment qualifies to be called a material resource? Now, primary science teachers should understand that resources do not always have to be purchased. The school environment itself is a giant science laboratory. For example, let's take plant for instance. You want to teach plant. In the school environment, you get things like grass, trees, leaves, flowers, weeds all around, even the soil. If you want to teach soil now, within the environment of the school, you could get sandy soil, clay soil, loamy soil. If you want to teach animals, right there around the community or around the school environs, you will find things like ants, butterflies, even birds flying around, earthworms, grasshoppers, and the rest of them. So you could use all of those things to teach them. That's how the environment serves as a material resource for teaching science in the primary section. So now, what of improvisation? What does it mean to improvise? Now, improvisation means using locally available or inexpensive materials as substitute for standard instructional materials that are unavailable or too expensive. When you are trying to use what is available instead of what should be used, and you're trying to improvise, like this is what, for it. Okay, let's take a very clear illustration. But let me first create this picture in your mind that when you improvise, the reason why you should know how to improvise as a teacher is that you should not say as a teacher that there are no science materials, therefore I cannot conduct the experiment. No, that's not a good science teacher. You should be creative as a teacher. What available material can perform the same function that we want to perform, that we don't have the resources available? What are the ones that we have that we can use as a substitute to teach that same uh that same function. Now, for instance, now let's say we have what is it called now? Uh, Let me say you want to we have measuring cylinder in the lab. So if you don't have measuring cylinder available in the lab or as a resource that you need to teach, and you know that it's something you should use, you could use transparent bottles, even cups or marked plastic containers to teach the same thing. If you want to use the model of the lungs, for instance, to teach, so if a teacher can improvise a model of human respiratory system using plastic bottles, balloons, even drinking straws, rubber sheet, what I'm just trying to say is that be creative when what you need, the original thing you need to teach that thing is not available. You could use whatsoever is available, you could improvise them. That is what we're trying to say. So if you want to teach the solar system and the school doesn't have that, there's no provision for the materials needed, you could use things like oranges, balls, even beads or thread to teach that same topic. So that is the idea we're trying to pass here, that you should know how to improvise. Now, what are the important principles of improvisation? You know, it doesn't mean that you can use anything carelessly when you are improvising. Well, an improvised material should be one, safe for the children. It should be suitable to what you are doing. It should be understandable. It should, reasonably be accurate, and also it should be relevant to the learning objectives. So you not just choose anything out of what your ancestors decide that you should use. Now, innovations in primary science. That is the next thing we are doing, and that's the last thing in this unit. Now, innovations can be defined as changes or new ways of doing things. In this context, it refers to creative ways with which a primary science pupil is transformed from a passive knowledge receiver into an active creator of the process in which he learns. So innovations can occur or take place in all aspects of learning and teaching of primary science, including the curriculum structure, methodology, teaching and learning environment, evaluation and usage of instructional materials. Now, the attention here is on instructional materials. In the early days, lessons were taught without recourse to instructional aids or materials, but because of the importance and relevance of these materials, primary science teaching today requires science equipment and other materials. Now, these include textbooks, charts, models, improvised material, etc. So today, videotape, cameras, multimedia projectors, closed circuit television, like CCTV, uh, simulation and computers are innovations that are used in teaching primary science. These have made science teaching and learning more interesting. However, development and implementation of innovations require skill, time, and adequate funding. It also poses a lot of challenges to teachers who are stagnant and are moving with the information, and are not moving with the information and communication technology, that's ICT trend of our time. So that is that. Now, what can we bring out from innovation? Innovation simply means introducing a new idea, method, process, or technology that improves the existing way of doing something. The thing has already been in existence, but you're looking for a better way of doing it. So in primary science education, innovation means finding better ways to make pupils active participants rather than passive receivers. So old-fashioned teaching is a teaching method where teacher talks, pupils listen, pupils copy from what the teacher is writing or saying or demonstrating, and then pupils memorize. That is the old method. But innovation science teaching, or when it becomes innovative, when we employ innovation into it, it becomes teacher present problem, then pupils observe, pupils investigate, pupils discuss, pupils discover, then teacher guides them. That's how innovation has, shaped the method of teaching science. Now, the pupils have not changed from knowledge receiver to knowledge explorer. They have the liberty to explore on their own. Now, let's take for example, if we want to teach them, probably let's use a floating and maybe floating and sinking of object. Now, the traditional method you would have used is you could use objects. Maybe the teacher can just write on the board and say objects that are less dense than water flow while some objects sink. The pupils will just copy that. You just say objects less dense than water float while some objects sink. So pupils, they just copy that. But in innovation method, or in an innovative method, what will you do as a teacher? Instead of you just going to the classroom and writing on the board that object less dense than water float while some objects sink, and these pupils just copy it, and that is what lesson over, or they keep saying it and reciting it until they are able to say it off hands. But in innovative way or innovative method of teaching, what happens is teacher enters the class with a stone, a bottle cap, maybe a spoon, leaf, coin, and then maybe a plastic bucket or any kind of bucket. Then the teacher asks the pupils, which object do you think will float? You are now allowing them to explore. You're not just giving them knowledge and then they receive it and that is all. No, they explore. You give them the room for exploration. So pupils predict. They may say that maybe they put the object into the water and then they record their observation. Maybe when they put the coin into the water, they notice what happened. So they'll say, oh, coin goes down instantly. So they record the observation. What has happened is that they have participated in the scientific investigation. They have participated in the scientific investigation. So that means they are active participants, not passive learners. So what areas do we have innovations today, or in what areas, or the areas where innovation can actually occur, can take place in the curriculum? That's the first thing listed here. So it changes what pupils learn. Now, teaching method are now moving from lecture method to discovery method, inquiry method, cooperative learning, project-based learning, problem solving, just like we've learned in some of your other courses. Now, innovation can take place in the learning environment. So moving science learning beyond the classroom, like going to gardens, farms, laboratories, museums, industries, and maybe virtual environment. Then assessment is another way innovation has, had an impact. So instead of assessing pupils only through written examinations, teachers may use projects, practical activities, observations, presentations, or even portfolios for so instructional materials are now moving from only chalkboard or marker board and textbook to using modern technologies. That's how innovation has really helped us. Now, ICT innovations in primary science. What are the information and communication technology innovations that we have in primary science? We have, excuse me, things like the computers, tablets, smartphones, multimedia projectors that we use in standard schools today, educational videos, animations, simulations, interactive boards, internet resources, and maybe virtual laboratories and the rest. So let's say you want to teach them the solar system. Imagine you trying to explain the Earth rotates while simultaneously revolving around the sun. When you have a textbook picture of that, it may help them. But an animation can show them the Earth rotating on its axis while simultaneously moving around the sun. So when they see the animation is just like a short clip, like as if it was acted. If you notice something I'm doing for, what's wrong with my voice? Excuse me. Something I'm doing for this set, this fresher, the under level, the NOU 107. So I'm trying to simulate the material into a video. We notice that most of them, they are now used to TikTok, 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 and they just go there to waste time. Somebody will spend 5 hours on TikTok learning nothing, just looking at somebody dancing and smiling at the camera. So what I was trying to do was to hijack that their mentality of always going there to. So when they're now swaying through the videos, just swiping up the videos, and then they're not seeing content of materials. You swipe up now, you see your NOE 107 Unit 1 come up, you have to watch it. Since that is the way they want to be spending their time, it's also good we learn to hijack that part for educational purpose, so that it's not just going to TikTok to waste time, or swiping through Facebook Reels or Instagram or anything. When we start integrating learning into all of those things too, it helps them. So imagine now, some of them said, while when I had the class with them and we were reading from the textbook, from the course material on the correspondence stage, they did not understand. When I animated it with a movie now, and I released it and they watch it, in fact, they were not able to grab the concept. They can even explain it to others now that, oh, this is what they were trying to say. So that is the work of animation. Showing them a picture in the textbook may help, but if you do animation of that same concept, it's become better. They understand better. So um, innovation has really helped uh, the way science is being taught today. What are the things ICT can promote in learning, or how can it promote meaningful learning? It makes difficult concepts easier to understand, provides videos and animations. It allows pupils to learn through simulations. It increases pupils' attention and also encourage interaction, provides access to information, support individual learning. It also makes lessons more interesting and then enable virtual experience of what you are teaching them. It also exposes the pupils to things unavailable in their immediate environment. They can watch the animation. That thing is not here, but once it has been animated, they can watch it and have an idea, even though they don't have that thing around them. So what are the challenges that innovation faces? We have challenges like lack of electricity. A school may have a projector, but when there is no electricity with which you will power the projector, then that is useless. Lack of internet is another thing. And then lack of skills. Like a teacher may have a laptop but not know how to operate presentation software like PowerPoint. So that is a very, so that means what I'm trying to tell you now is that in this innovative world, you must learn how to develop skills that align with the 21st century. So cost, computers, projectors, and science equipment can be expensive. And then we have resistance to change. Some teachers say, I have been teaching with chalkboard or with marker board for the past 20 years. Why should I change it to computer? So you need to know that you must learn to change. Don't be resistant to change. So I think that brings us to the end of mm, this class. So in the form of summary, you should know that science teaching will become effective when we have H plus M combined together. And what is H? Human resource. And what is M? The material resource. So when the two are combined together, it helps us to teach science effectively. And then it also increases the understanding of your learners. So this is where the class will end today. In our next class, we'll move to Module 3, which is Basic Foundations of Primary Science. We'll start the science subject one by one: Introduction to Biology, Chemistry, Physics, Physiology, Machines, Pulleys, and Friction, and so on. So I think we are going to something more realistic now. Be prepared for the next class. If you have any question on this one, just message me on WhatsApp and we will deal with those questions. Thank you for your understanding. This is the method I will use this week because this week is a very busy week for me. I will record the classes and drop them for you. You watch them at your convenience. Thanks for your understanding and do enjoy the rest of your day.